only.
Good evening again. My name is Chad Stubenbort, resident of Monroeville. Just wanted to address two things that are budget related that were made at the end of the meeting. Number one, I never recommended outsourcing refuse collection. I recommended looking at an additional revenue source.
I didn't say you did. I
waste.
said that we discussed that as a council.
So that was the one point I wanted to make. Number two, never brought up any of those other things. So again, I'm just going to make a blanket statement. I recommend looking at cutting 1.59% and balancing the budget without fund utilization. No plans to outsource. No plans on shutting down or combining the center.
Chad, I have to address. I mean, your point. Everybody wants to cut. Okay, everybody wants to, run an organization as nimble as possible. Doesn't matter if it's a municipality or Joe's Auto Body Shop. And your point is well taken. Back in 2009, just to give you a little history, and you may know better about it than I do, because you lived here at that time, I didn't. The municipality brought in an outside consultant to cut, okay? And if I'm not mistaken, everybody cut 10% from their budget. Not 1.5, 10%. Where before, little things like we had water coolers upstairs, that was taken out. Now we pay for it ourselves, the employees, okay? So then I come on board in 2010. I'm given a mandate by council to cut 10%, 5% from budgets again. And on top of that, people retire, they're not replaced. All right. Now we fast forward to the present, and I'm just giving you a Reader's Digest version. You fast forward to the present. You can only cut and cut and cut so much. Now, can we cut more? Unquestionably. We can cut till the cows come home. We can cut the senior citizens. We can cut the whole thing. Council can say we're not going to have, and I'm being over the top, and you know that. I mean, we can say to the Senior Citizen Center, we're really going to, hey, we can't afford it, we're going to cut 25% from your budget. We can cut the TV station, not have it, okay? We can cut what we give to the library, all right? We're slated possibly to hire 2 more police officers. We can tell Mr. Cole, we're not doing that. All right, that saves us $400,000. But we have a mission here, just like you have a mission on the school board. We have a mission to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the community. Now, a large part of that is law enforcement, and a large part of that is doing simple things that you do in paving roads. Now, through the decades and through the century, municipalities have taken on libraries, park and recreation, senior citizen centers, and they make a quality of life in the community. They increase property values, and they make Monroeville, our community park, we get rave reviews in a community park. The council back in 2006 could have decided I don't even know what it cost, $12 million. I hear all kind of different figures on what it cost for the community park. And at that time, we had maybe $20 million I think it was $20 million in the coffers going back 12 years ago. They could have decided, no, we're not doing that. We're not building the community park. Well, they made the decision to build the community park. And now it's a very good decision. History has shown that was a very good decision. Now, if you had somebody on council at that time said, no, we can't do that, that's too frivolous. But they did it. Now, there was thoughts of maybe putting a swimming pool up at the park, but we haven't done that. So every council has their ideas on what a quality of life in a community is. My bottom line point is you keep cutting, you keep cutting, you keep cutting, you're not going to have one of the better communities in Allegheny County. And 3 years ago, I showed a chart on where communities are on a maturation process. And you hit an apex, you start out very small as a rural area, you hit an apex, and then you start on a downward slope. And if you look at it as a clock, with noon being your apex, we're about at 1 o'clock coming down on a downward slope. And we want to prevent that. We want to put a stopgap in there. Now, does that mean you look at your budget and do the things that you're talking about? Unquestionably, you do. And we do that. We do that. And I think the mayor pointed out rather poignantly what he does with his money, and everybody else up here statutorily are permitted to get. And you can cut that. Everybody up here can say, okay, we're not going to get that money, which equals up to about $25,000. But it's not going to do anything to the quality of life in Monroeville. But it helps the people up on this dais, it helps them out tremendously to help govern this community. And that's why the state legislature puts that in the borough code from decades ago, that they can do that. So there's two sides of the coin to look at when you're looking at cutting and cutting and cutting. And you want to also keep the morale of the employees up. If you constantly don't replace people in departments, they get tired of being overstressed, trying to complete things that can't be complete. Then I complain to them, council complains to me, and then you just have a bad place to work. And you want to try to prevent that also. So you always have to be cognizant of those kind of things when you bring up cutting. You get to a point where you just can't cut anymore.
Yeah, and I agree. I think right now that we're just scratching the budget. We're not really digging deep. You had said if you keep cutting, you're going to have a municipality that no one wants to live in. Well, if we keep spending, we're going to have a municipality that no one's going to want to live in. And if you look at Penn Hills, you look at these other areas around us, that's what they've done. They've spent money frivolously. They have gone way above and beyond their means, and they're left with those financial problems. And we all sit here and say, how the heck did Penn Hills School Board do that? How the heck did they ever get to that point? When we have $4.8 million in our general fund, and we're targeted to utilize $700,000 to $500,000 each and every year, something's got to turn. We're either going to continue to increase taxes, which if we look at municipalities and boroughs that have high millage rates, you'll see the kind of municipalities that those represent. So we most likely don't want to continue to raise and raise and raise. So all I'm asking is just to look at some alternative ways. You had said council's pay is $25,000. I understand, out of a $31 million budget, that is minuscule. But to tell the public what that represents, right, $25,000 represents half of a new police officer's starting salary. Right? They start off at $54,000.
That is correct.
That's not true.
Well, with benefits, it's more.
Yeah, but their starting salary, which I stated, it is correct. So I'm not saying that that's going to save the municipality by getting rid of the $300 or $400. I know, I'm very well aware that's a nominal amount. But if we continue to look at those ways, I think anyone, if you ask the public, because, Greg, you had mentioned, well, when we asked the public, do we want to do this with the dispatch center, do we want to do this with refuse, this is what they came back to say. If you ask the public, hey, would you rather us get $300 a month, or would you rather us have half a police officer's salary paid for, I think we know what they would say there. So I don't want to dwell on one point. I just want to ask that we look at alternative ways. Look at overtime spending. Some of these departments' overtime is ridiculous if you guys have looked at that.
And Chad, to bring, your point is well taken, but to bring up just the overtime is there. If you're talking about the police department, probably more so.
Any department.
It's there because why? Because officers haven't been replaced. Doug Cole does a good job as far as keeping court time down. There's a lot of things that go on behind the scene that we try to impart upon the public, but you can't impart everything upon the public.
No, I agree. I just recommend that we look at, if we look at the animal control, right, it's 4 hours or 8 hours of overtime each and every weekend. Look at just changing around the schedule. Maybe he works 8 hours less during the weekend. That way we're not paying overtime each and every year. I know you guys went into that one a lot and pretty deep
last year. We did, right.
But I'm just suggesting look at alternative ways. Dig a little bit deeper.
When a police officer makes a late arrest, how do you stop overtime?
No, I never mentioned police overtime.
When the snow falls, how do you stop overtime?
Well, that one actually is pretty manageable. You can look at alternating schedules, so instead of people coming in at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, they can start later in the day, and that way you can take away a few hours.
Well, we would need a bigger public works force to do that, Chad.
Again, I'm just...
Sometimes spending overtime is less expensive than hiring.
Tim, I'd like to ask a question to you. Sure. When does council get overtime?
Thank you.
No, council doesn't get overtime.
Oh, we don't get. Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
No, and I agree, and I think public servants are
Well, I mean, I want to get back to one point on what you mentioned, Chad, about other places spending money frivolously, indicating that we're spending money frivolously. And I do not believe we are spending money frivolously. The lion's share of the cost in this municipality and any other municipality, as well as school districts, as you well know, Chad, are labor costs and benefits.
Absolutely.
That's the lion's share. So not replacing people, police officers when they retire, public works people, people here in the administrative staff, and I can give it to you
No,
on how
absolutely.
many,
I mean, your budget,
how much money this municipality has saved since the year 2000 with not replacing people. I went through that 3 years ago on the 2014 budget. So I would not venture to say that this municipality spends money frivolously. What you can say is that we have decent salaries here in this municipality. Now, that's not something that you're going to get rid of with union contracts you're negotiating. You're not going to get rid of that. Okay, that kind of thing doesn't happen overnight. All right, in order to get things in line. I think we had a very successful Act 111 interest arbitration. I think it was very fair. I think we made some headway there. There are areas in which we're making headway in saving money. As I mentioned, our fund balance is looking better. To touch on that a little bit. The other thing, too, if you looked in the budget, and not $1 million was not budgeted to bring back $1 million from our OPEB fund, other post-employment benefits. All right. Now, what I've mentioned to council at my budget message is that we're trying to make it so, see if the general fund can sustain a little bit of not bringing back $1 million, but saving $300,000. That may be why the fund balance is there. We can bring money back in from the OPEB fund. I'm trying to see how that goes. That we've only taken $250,000. We were budgeted $1 million this year. We've only taken $250,000 from the OPEB. The general fund has sustained that. Plus, the fund balance is getting a little bit better, even given that. So our cash flow is doing pretty well. But if we go into next year, my point being, if we go into next year and on our balance sheet, the accounts receivable we'll be having for the OPEB fund to take money in, we may not have to take it out of the fund balance. That fund balance, you know about budgeting, you're on a school board. That fund balance is there to balance out the budget. Whether we use it or not, we didn't use it this year. So whether we use it or not remains to be seen. We can take it out of the OPEB fund because that's going to be on our accounts receivable balance sheet. All right. So we're trying to save money. Everything that you're looking at right now, I understand what you're saying. But one thing I do want to say is we're not spending money frivolously.
No, I agree, and I don't think we are yet. But I think we are approaching a crossroads, and we can be a thriving neighborhood, or we can be a neighborhood that spends money like Penn Hills. We oftentimes paint in politics, right? It's either the worst, the world's going to end, snow's going to be all over the streets, we're not going to have cops, crime's going to be up, well, it's already up, but all these things are going to happen if we make cuts, and I just don't believe that to be true. I think there are some ways we can look at to make some cuts to save some money, so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Once again,